This disrespectful husband learned his lesson. When Steve Harvey stopped him immediately, cameras were still rolling, when Marcus Bellamy grabbed his wife Gloria's microphone out of her hand mid-sentence and told her to stop embarrassing herself in front of 200 people. Gloria froze. Her mouth stayed open, but no sound came out. The audience went completely quiet, and Steve Harvey, who had hosted over 5,000 episodes of Family Feud without once stopping a taping, took 3 steps forward, pointed one finger at Marcus, and said 5 words that the production crew would talk about for the rest of their careers. It was a Tuesday afternoon in Los Angeles. The date was March 14, 2023, and Stage 29 at the CBS Television City Studios was running a normal taping schedule. 2 families, 2 rounds, the usual 30 minutes of setup before cameras rolled. The Bellamy family from Macon, Georgia, had driven 11 hours straight for their shot at the $100,000 Family Feud prize. Gloria, 58, had been awake since 4 a.m. She'd ironed everyone's shirts herself. She'd packed the sandwiches. She'd rehearsed the fast money questions out loud in the passenger seat while the Georgia highway slid past in the dark. Her husband Marcus, 61, had spent the drive telling her she was going to say something wrong on national television. The opposing family, the Washingtons from Memphis, were cheerful and loose on their side of the stage. Their mother, Diane Washington, 62, kept laughing at something her youngest son whispered to her. The Bellamy children, 3 adult kids ranging from 27 to 34, stood straight and watched their parents with the kind of careful, practiced stillness that only grows in houses where silence is a survival skill. But nobody in that studio knew what was about to happen. Gloria Bellamy had been managing a $47 monthly prescription copay for blood pressure medication that Marcus didn't know about, because she'd been paying for it from the emergency cash she kept folded in the back of a birthday card in her nightstand drawer, the one place she knew he never looked. She'd been doing this for 9 months. She hadn't told her children. She hadn't told her sister. She'd told no one, because telling anyone meant Marcus finding out, and Marcus finding out meant a fight, and a fight meant 3 days of silence in a house where she already felt invisible most of the time. The medication had been approved by her primary care doctor in June of 2022. By July, the insurance claim came back stamped, deemed non-essential for the patient's current health profile. Gloria appealed in August. The appeal was denied in September. She filed a second appeal with additional documentation from her cardiologist in October. That was denied in November with a form letter that described her as a low-risk candidate, not meeting threshold criteria. She stopped filing appeals after that. She couldn't afford the time off work to keep making phone calls during business hours, and she couldn't afford to be without the medication. So she did the only math she had: $47 a month from the birthday card drawer. 9 months in a row, quietly. What she was paying for was not just the pills. It was also the silence that let her keep going. On stage, the Bellamy family had gotten off to a solid start. They answered 4 questions correctly in the first round and were 180 points ahead of the Washingtons. Gloria answered her questions precisely, each answer landing exactly where the board wanted it to be. She knew all the answers. She'd studied for this. She'd printed practice Family Feud questions off the internet and quizzed herself in the bathroom mirror for 3 weeks straight. When it came to the lightning round, Steve turned to her and asked, "Name something a husband does that makes his wife feel invisible." Gloria's mouth moved faster than her filter. She said, "Talks over her like she's not even there." The board lit up. "Number 1 answer." The audience cheered. Steve pointed at the board and laughed. And that was when Marcus leaned over and grabbed the microphone from her hand. He said, and this was caught on 5 separate camera angles, "Let me talk. You were about to say something stupid." Then he looked at the audience and smiled like he'd done them a favor. The studio fell completely silent. Gloria's youngest daughter, seated in the family row behind them, pressed both hands flat against her thighs and looked at the floor. The audience didn't laugh. Nobody moved. And Gloria just stood there, her hands still slightly raised in the shape they'd been when the microphone was in them, her eyes going somewhere far away from that stage, somewhere she had long practiced getting to when this happened. That was the moment Alexis Bellamy, age 27, Gloria's youngest daughter, said what she said. Not loudly. Not for the audience. She leaned sideways toward her brother Darnell and whispered, loud enough for the nearest boom mic to catch it. She does this face every time. I've been watching her do this face my whole life. The boom operator, a 14-year television veteran named Craig, later said it was the line that broke him. And then Steve Harvey did something that has never happened in 25 years of Family Feud tapings. He stopped the game. He turned to the producer booth and made one flat horizontal gesture with his right hand, the universal cut signal, and said, "Stop everything." Two producers stood up behind the glass. A floor director moved toward the set. Steve was already walking forward. He stopped 4 feet from Marcus Bellamy, squared his shoulders, and said the 5 words that would be heard by 340 million people before the month was over. Not while I'm standing here. The studio fell completely silent. Steve didn't raise his voice. He didn't perform it for the cameras. He spoke it the way a man speaks when he has decided something and needs the other person to understand that the deciding is already done. Then he turned away from Marcus and looked directly at Gloria. He said, "Ma'am, what's your name?" She said, "Gloria." He said, "Gloria, I'm going to ask you to answer that question again. And I'm going to need everybody else to let her finish." Steve would later call what happened next the most important moment of his career. Gloria looked at the board. She looked at Steve, and then she said, in a voice steady enough to fill the room without the microphone, "A husband makes his wife feel invisible when he answers for her before she gets the chance to speak. When he tells her what she meant instead of asking. When she learns to make herself small in her own house to keep the peace." The board was already showing her first answer. There was no second slot for what she just said. That didn't matter. Nobody was looking at the board. The crew was not okay. A camera operator on the far right of the set had his head down. The floor director had stopped moving. In the family row, Alexis Bellamy had both hands over her mouth, and Marcus Bellamy was standing in a place that had no name for it. Not quite embarrassed, not quite angry, somewhere stripped of whatever he'd walked in with. Steve turned to face the audience. Then he turned to face the cameras. He said, "I want to talk to everyone watching at home." He paused. "This right here, what you just saw, this is not entertainment. This is somebody's life. This happens in real living rooms, in real houses, with real women who have been invisible for so long they've started to believe that's just their shape." He turned back to Gloria. He said, "Let me tell you something." And then Steve Harvey did what he only does when something has gotten past the television show and into the actual person. He said, 26 years ago, I was living in my 1976 Ford Tempo. 3 years, no address, no phone, eating out of trash cans. And I promised God that if he ever got me out of that car, I would spend the rest of my life helping people who felt like nobody saw them. He stopped. "Gloria, I see you. And anybody who makes you feel like what you just said isn't worth hearing, that's not love. That's not partnership. That's not how this is supposed to go." The studio fell completely silent. Marcus Bellamy did not speak. He looked at the floor. His oldest son, Darnell, reached over and put a hand on his father's arm, not in defense of him, but in the way a son does when he is trying to keep a moment from becoming something permanent. Steve wasn't done. He called for a production pause. Then he asked a production assistant to bring a phone to the stage. The assistant looked at the producers behind the glass. One of them shrugged. Nobody had a protocol for this, because this had never happened. The phone came to the stage. Steve turned to Gloria and asked who she would most want to talk to right now. Anyone in the world. Gloria said her mother. Her mother, Evelyn Harris, 81 years old, was at home in Macon, Georgia, watching the taping timestamp on her DVR, waiting to see her daughter on television. She picked up on the second ring. Steve Harvey said, "Miss Harris, my name is Steve Harvey, and I'm calling because I'm standing next to your daughter, and I want her to hear you say something." A pause. Then an 81-year-old woman's voice, thin and clear over the speaker. "Gloria, baby, I have always been proud of you. Every single day." Gloria Bellamy's knees bent. She caught the podium with both hands. She didn't fall. She had too much practice holding herself up. But her shoulders came down about 2 inches, and anyone watching could see that something she'd been carrying for a month, for a year, for 31 years of marriage had shifted its weight. Steve wasn't done. He looked at the Bellamy children. He told Darnell, Alexis, and their brother Jerome that their mother had given them something that couldn't be priced. The example of someone who keeps showing up, who keeps being exactly what other people need, even when nobody is keeping track of what she needs. He said, "The question is, what are y'all going to do with it?" Then he turned to Marcus. He didn't perform it. He said it quiet. "You got a choice to make about who you're going to be. And you got people standing right here who still want to see you make the right one." Both families received their winnings. The Washingtons, who had lost the round, cheered louder than anyone when the Bellamy Prize was announced. Diane Washington walked across the stage and hugged Gloria Bellamy without asking permission. The audience stood up. The crew, including Craig the boom operator, was not okay. The clip, unedited, all 11 minutes, was posted to the Family Feud YouTube channel 3 days after taping. It crossed 50 million views in 48 hours. By the end of the week, it was at 180 million. By the end of the month, it had been seen 340 million times across every platform. The hashtag #NotWhileI'mStandingHere trended in 44 countries. Gloria Bellamy's name was searched more times in that 30-day window than any non-celebrity had ever been searched following a television appearance. In April of 2023, Steve Harvey's foundation launched a fund called the Gloria Project, named at Gloria's request after every woman who has ever answered a question and had the microphone taken from her hand. In its first year, the Gloria Project provided financial assistance, counseling access, and legal support to 14,000 women in 38 states. By the end of 2024, that number was 41,000. Partners included 17 hospital systems, 4 national insurance advocacy organizations, and 2 pieces of state legislation named in part after the project's documented casework. Marcus Bellamy enrolled in a 16-week couples therapy program 6 weeks after the taping. He didn't do it for the cameras. There were no cameras. He did it because Alexis told him that she had watched her mother make that face her whole life, and she was not willing to watch her daughter make it too. Steve Harvey gave an interview to The Atlantic in June of 2023. When the journalist asked him what he was thinking in the moment he stopped the taping, he said, "I wasn't thinking. The thing that moves faster than thought took over. I knew what I was looking at, because I knew what it felt like to be invisible and have nobody stop the room for you. I stopped the room. Today, Gloria Bellamy teaches a free Saturday morning class at her church in Macon, a workshop she calls Finding Your Voice After You've Forgotten It Was Yours. 43 women attend regularly. She does not use a microphone. She says she doesn't need one. She says she knows how to fill a room now. 31 years of marriage is a long time to carry something in a birthday card drawer. But the thing about weight is that once someone helps you set it down, you remember what it felt like to walk without it. And you don't go back. If you know a woman who has learned to make herself small in her own house, who answers questions in a voice that's already apologizing for taking up space, send her this video. Not with a note, not with a speech. Just send it. Let her watch a man stop a television show and say 5 words that someone should have said to her a long time ago. And if this story stayed with you, if it reminded you of someone or something you recognized in yourself, share it right now. Subscribe if you're new. These are the stories worth keeping.